Trouble for an incumbent Miami-Dade County Commissioner. Linda Bell locked in a tough and nasty election race with Daniela Levine Cava. They will face off here live.
The politics of Mother Nature. Rick Scott and Charlie Crist battle for the environmental label. Both may have a tough sell. It's just one of the topics we take to the roundtable.
Millions to build, years in the making. South Point Pier is about to open. We will have a sneak peek when we visit Janine Stanwood's neighborhood. Good morning, glad you could join us. These are supposed to be the dog days of summer, but there is sure a lot going on.
And we have a packed program for you. Election season, though, gets underway tomorrow as early voting opens. And so this morning we begin with the most expensive and testy Miami-Dade Commission race in years.
It is the in Commission District 8, which includes most of western and southern Miami-Dade County, including the cities of Homestead, Palmetto Bay, and Cutler Bay. But all 13 county commissioners represent really all the people of the county on many big issues, so they may represent one district, but they have responsibilities for many countywide services: the airport, the seaport, police, fire, environmental protection, code enforcement, and so on.
And so let us introduce Linda Bell. Has represented the district for the past 4 years, and she is running for re-election. Obviously, she is a Hollywood native and lives in Homestead, where she served as mayor.
And Daniela Levine Cava is a lawyer, civic activist, and social services executive. She founded and ran Catalyst Miami, which helps poor and low-income people. She previously was the director of the Guardian Ad Litem program in Miami-Dade.
Welcome. Welcome, everybody. Glad you're here.
We're very glad that you're both here. And this is, strictly speaking, not a formal debate. You're obviously not behind podiums. It's more of a conversation, and Glenna and I are going to direct it. And when we kind of think that we've reached a point of no return, but when when it has been well subjected to abuse, then we will move on to the next. And Linda Bell, let me start with you. You are the incumbent.
Yes.
You have served for 4 years. Now you are asking voters for another 4 years in office. Why should they vote for you?
Well, because I've kept my promises on bringing jobs to Miami-Dade County, especially District 8, bringing real county reform, keeping taxes low, bringing reforms such as term limits to the ballot. And I have to tell you, when you said trouble in Miami-Dade County, trouble for Commissioner Bell, well, when you've got 9 bargaining units, 9 unions coming against you who had to recruit somebody against you, I guess trouble is a good word.
We'll get to that in a little bit, and we'll get into all the nitty-gritty, but it's as close to an opening statement, I suppose, as we can get in a non-debate. Daniela Levine Cava, why do you think Commissioner Bell should be essentially fired, and why should you take her place?
I have 30+ years of service in this community. I've been working county-wide and with lots of time in South Dade, focusing on the needs of families, children, seniors, small businesses, growing the economy, helping the community thrive. So I have a coalition of people who've been urging me to run for many years, and finally decided to step up in this race because we need change.
You have both accused each other at various times, and most recently in this past week, of lying about things you have said or not said. And Linda, you have accused Daniela and her nonprofit, through her executive director, of actually supporting the Marlins Stadium deal. She says she didn't, and her social service agency did not.
Well, they did.
How did they do that?
We have the transcripts from the meeting, and the transcripts are very, very clear. In fact, all that was missing from her director were pom-poms. And she actually says that, I certainly share the same sentiments with both mayors, Alvarez and Diaz, and I'm sure many of you on the commission, that in order to be a major league city, Miami needs a major league baseball stadium. It wasn't saying, well, since you're going to pass it anyway. It was cheerleading. And then she says, the funding for the deal is certainly a feat of creative ingenuity.
Right.
But to say that because you signed a card against it, well, the poor thing obviously signed the wrong card.
Well,
Can I just jump in here for some context? I actually heard that. I did. And what this woman, Abigail Leddick, was saying, and Daniela, can we go by first names here? Is that
I wish you would, yes.
Maybe you can jump in. But in context, this woman was talking about what the funding should include should the commission pass this. She wasn't advocating for and against. What she wanted to do was make sure that the funding for the stadium that the commission passed included things like jobs and affordable housing, and that was built into the Marlins funding. It was kind of a request, was my take.
But actually, they wanted to add a tax to it. They wanted to tax the residents.
Let's give Daniela a
Thank
chance
you
to
so
respond,
much.
As the head of that organization.
Yes, yes. Well, we were among the earliest to identify the problems with this deal. And in fact, we hosted a coalition of groups that were opposed to the stadium deal. And as always in politics, you try to make lemonade out of lemons. So, you know, if it looked like it was heading a certain way, we wanted to be sure that the neighborhood would benefit. So that was the context. We did have a coalition, many active groups meeting in anticipation, and then she went down as part of that coalition and clearly filed the card, the speaker's card, against. That is very clear, and that's what she was doing.
Right.
Was she also a baseball enthusiast? Yes.
Yeah.
I chaired
at
many
any point,
meetings.
hold just a minute, please, Linda. At any point, did you stand up before the county commission and say anything about the Marlins Stadium deal?
I personally, absolutely not. No, I wasn't part of. She was our policy director, and she went down.
Okay.
Yeah.
There was no opposition against it. I've never heard one person, when they stood up, they did not speak against it. I don't know how you can have it
On
both
that
ways.
particular date?
Yes, I don't know how. She
Well,
didn't
I heard
stand.
plenty of people speak about it
I'm
at
talking
other
about
times.
Catalyst. I'm talking about Catalyst.
Yeah.
She did not stand up and say, I don't support this, but if it's going to pass, let's take this into account. I didn't hear that. I'm telling you, all that was missing was the pom-poms. Right under here, under Human Services Coalition, it specifically says, I share the sentiments of both mayors.
Yeah.
Well, if you're going to share the sentiments with both mayors who are vying to pass this boondoggle on the taxpayers of Miami-Dade County, you don't say I share the sentiments.
Yeah.
You say I don't share the sentiments, not I do.
You know, as long as we're talking about stadium, and this is something that's very important even as we speak in the county, let's talk about Parcel B. Talk
Yes.
about giving land away most recently, and still David Beckham is still in play with his soccer stadium. The Cuban Museum wants that Parcel B, which I believe you voted to consider.
To explore it.
What, can you both, Linda Bell, give us your take on parcels of land, giveaway, stadium funding?
Could I just jump in before we get the answers, which is, it's a great
Always.
question. Parcel B, for anybody who doesn't know what that means,
Yes.
is a roughly 4-acre piece of land which sits immediately east of the American Airlines Arena. In 1996, when the Heat were trying to get approval to build the arena, they had an extensive ad campaign that said, build a world-class waterfront, and we will put a park right there on that property. Of course, it's not a park. It's a staging area for the arena, and
County
it's
land
fenced
on
off.
the water.
But it's a incredibly valuable piece of land. So forgive me, I just had to.
No, that was a beautiful explanation.
Okay.
Now,
Thank
Parcel
you.
B on the water.
Yes.
You voted to essentially give that
look
to
into
the
it.
plan of
Yeah.
the museum.
I voted definitely to direct the mayor to take a look at this and see if this is a feasible plan. Absolutely. This is a 4-acre parcel, and the people that want to build and construct a Cuban Heritage Museum want less than 1 acre, excuse me, less than 1 acre out of 4 acres, and then they want to develop it into a park. You're talking about something that's been fenced off for years, is blocked from the water. There's no waterfront view. We have Perez Art Museum right there. We have the Frost Science Museum right there, and many states and many cities are creating this museum park. To develop 3 acres into a park that's now a staging ground for elephants, I don't think is a bad idea. And if American Airlines Arena wants to preserve that land, then let them pay for it.
All right. Daniela, where do you stand on Parcel B? Should it be, in a sense, given over or leased to the Cuban exile group that wants to build the museum, or should it be a green space?
First of all, the Cuban heritage in this community is unparalleled and unique, and something that we need to lift up in every way we possibly can. And do we need a world-class institution to explain to the world about that? Yes, I think that's extremely worthwhile, and a wonderful group of people came together to champion it. As to its location, I think we need to really carefully consider the costs and the benefits to the community, and so I think we need to really be sure that our dollars are being used in the best possible way, both to honor the heritage and also to honor the public
What's
space.
your policy in a broad sense of giving public land to developers or stadium operators, or
Yes.
public space going for private venture? Does it depend what the private venture is, or do you
Yes.
hold the line on
Yes.
public land remains in the public?
Yes, I think that the public space advocates have been very active in particularly the downtown area, helping to see the tremendous value that that space provides. And now that we have so many new residents and we have so much life in the downtown area, which we didn't have for many years, it's even more critically important. And we do have some master plans that need to be taken in consideration and public input.
Linda, let me ask you about, since Glenna mentioned David Beckham, he initially wanted land, is essentially now a parking lot on the southwest corner of the port.
Correct.
He didn't get that because
We
Richard
voted
Fain
against it.
rose up and said, no, don't do that, and you and your colleagues voted against it. Where do you think Mr. Beckham could build a stadium at his expense?
I'm glad you said that, because I met with Beckham and I met with Beckham's group, and we were perfectly clear that if you're we're so happy to get a soccer stadium. We're very happy to get soccer in Miami-Dade County, but it has to be on his dime, 100% on his dime. There are lands, and I would love if he could find private land, absolutely. But if it's public land, it has to be at retail value, and it's going to be, and I don't know why that they don't take a look near the Marlins. I mean, whether or not...
He says it's spiritually tainted because of the Marlins deal and the bad feelings about it.
Well, I don't know about being spiritually tainted, but I think that he has to look at some alternative sites. I do. And I think that we shouldn't shut the door to soccer in Miami-Dade County. We should keep the door open, especially if they want to put an infusion of their own money and bring jobs to this county and jobs to this community on their own dime. I'm all for it.
Let's take a quick break, and we will continue this discussion when we come right back.
Thank you.
On this Sunday morning, we have the two candidates for the District 8 Miami-Dade County Commission seat. On my right is Daniela Levine Cava, and that is Commissioner Linda Bell, the current incumbent. Daniela, as you know, the Mayor Jimenez has proposed a roughly $6 billion budget. He calls it the worst case scenario budget, and it's got a number of cuts, and one of the cuts would be about 230 Miami-Dade County police officers. This week, you probably saw a deputy director of the department, Juan Perez, gave an impassioned speech in which he said, this cannot happen. Now, if you are a commissioner, what would you do to keep those jobs?
First of all, there are definitely things in the budget that have not been explored. We do still have junkets, trade trips by county commissioners. We have dollars that are used for things that are not essential. There's many areas, and right now it's too late.
There's fat in the budget, all right?
Yes,
so
but right now we can't have negotiations and concessions that would happen in time for this budget to be passed. We're on an existing 3-year contract. All the negotiations have to do with future year contracts, and my opponent has voted for all of these budgets.
So I guess really the question at hand right now is, would you vote to allow the unions to recoup the 5% that they gave up 3 years ago, that the mayor says will put a $63 million hole in the budget, or continue that, what they're calling sacrifice, for another contract, so that there is not that hole in the budget?
Right. Well, the vote was already taken about the restoration of the cut, and that was a promise that was made. So
You're talking 3 years ago.
Yes. So that vote was already taken. You know, at this time, how are we going to balance the budget? You know, I look forward to being in a position to be able to analyze that more thoroughly, but I don't think that cuts to the police officers that we've just trained after a several-year hiatus, when in neighborhoods people are asking for more police protection. In my district, the Ag Patrol has been cut, so there's no midnight to 7 shift, and people are crying out for more police protection.
Linda,
yeah.
you actually voted to keep that 5%.
What she just said is
contribution
absolutely
out.
false. This is a lack of grasp of understanding of the budget. She said that the concessions couldn't come back. That's absolutely false. This is what happens when you don't understand how the budget works. We have been in a 3-year budget cycle, but we've been managing by crisis every single year because we're constantly going with vetoes and overrides, and so this is why we've been doing this yearly. But we need to get back to this 3-year budget. But what she said is, we can't negotiate those concessions that we've been given. Absolutely. In fact, those concessions are being negotiated as we speak.
Right. The 9 bargaining units for the county are in negotiations.
Yes. There's $113 million worth of concessions that are slated to snap back. So when we talk about the worst case scenario, that is if the unions don't give up those concessions, if they don't say, okay, flex pay, premium pay, holiday premium pay, we have pay for people just to show up for work. And this is why the $9 combined bargaining units support Daniela because she's promised to raise taxes to give them everything they want.
Yeah.
And this is the point.
All right, well,
If
hold on
we-
just a
we
minute.
want
Let me-
those police officers on the
Hold on
street.
just a minute. You've made a serious accusation.
I would say so.
Essentially, she has said you are bought and paid for by the county.
Yes,
union.
and I have already said that the reason why they haven't asked me to make any promises is because they want me to be there to listen to them, to exercise my good judgment. They might have asked my opponent to make promises. I don't know. I wasn't in the room. But it might be because she doesn't have the record that I have of working collaboratively in the community.
Do you think, does government just cost too much right now?
Yes, it does.
And how do you stop that?
Yes, it does. What we're talking about is keeping more officers on the street, bringing more firefighters on the street. The more you pay, and the union bosses are not wanting to give up any concessions, and they're willing to sacrifice the lower level employees. That's wrong. If we give the concessions back, then we save the employees and we have more officers on the street, not less.
Yeah.
Do you know we pay people overtime while they're on vacation? We pay them overtime for sick leave. We give them a premium pay for showing up to work. We call it the walking and breathing pay. These are the things that we have to get in order. It's insane,
Well,
Michael.
they've been written into the contracts over a number of years. I need to ask you both about the fact that when the commission voted to set the millage rate a couple of weeks ago, you and your fellow commissioners raised the library millage slightly to kind of bring it back close to what
Yes.
it had been. It's still well below what the library advocates want.
Oh no, we restored the funding back to what was slashed. In fact, John Quick.
Well,
from
they
the-
want $64 million. You're not at $64 million.
That's what they want, but that's not what the budget dictated. In fact, I called the library director, Mr. Santiago, up and asked them where they came up with $64 million.
Yeah.
He says, I have no clue. What we need is the restoration. And I've actually gotten a letter from Friends of the Libraries thanking me for the restoration of funding. And of course, my opponent would say, great, we restored funding, but it's not enough. You know what, Michael? We don't have a taxing problem in Miami-Dade County. We have a spending problem in Miami-Dade County. We just can't keep taxing the poor residents of Miami-Dade County. Enough is enough. We restored the funding of the libraries back to what it was 3 years ago.
Yeah, all right,
that should
but-
be that's an achievement.
But Daniela, where do you stand on this? I mean, if you had been on the commission, you certainly, I'm sure, would have
Yes.
voted to raise the millage, but would you have raised it more than it was?
Well, again, we have to look at what other opportunities we have in the budget. The money from the libraries was taken away many years ago by Mayor Jimenez and approved by the commission.
Well, it was
So
taken from the fire budget.
it was, no, that's this year. In the past, the millage was reduced for the libraries, and they used the reserves for the last 3
From the
years.
fire budget, you're
From the
right.
fire budget.
And that's why they're, well, this year again from the fire budget. That's why the library is in the shape that it's in, because they spent down all the reserves, they depleted all the programs that were world class. We were award-winning library system.
Right.
So what's now being proposed brings us to a basic staffing level, but it does not restore those programs.
this is
And that's
sad.
why the Blue Ribbon Task Force, and I served on one of the committees, and the advisory library board requested that additional
Now,
amount
this
of
is
money.
sad that she's saying that we still don't have world-class libraries because we didn't raise it higher than what it already was 3 years ago. I'm telling you, our libraries are still world-class libraries. We have the best. And the restoration of the funding was correct. And I took my lead from the library director, Robert Santiago, and I'm proud of that. And actually, what we were doing is we were taking the library surplus, not for the fire. We weren't taking from the fire. We were taking from the library surplus for the fire, and that stopped.
Yeah.
That is completely stopped. So we restored the funding and stopped taking the surplus. But I got to tell you something. My opponent keeps talking about her experience in Calais, Miami for budgeting. How can you say that when your own organization went in the red so many times? Budget holes, budget holes, budget holes. In the hole, hundreds of thousands of dollars in the hole. So how can you say you can
All
balance
right,
a $6.3 billion
let's give
budget?
Daniela a chance to respond to
Thank
that.
you so much. First, I'd like to go back to the fact that this kind of demonization of our workforce is what has characterized my opponent in the budget talks. So she paints with a broad brush. She makes gross generalizations about all these perks when the people I talk to haven't gotten a raise in 8 years, many of them, and they're really suffering with the increased cost of living.
Quick question. The mayor says that the pension and benefits promised to the workforce, 3/4 of the budget goes to workforce, is untenable, is unsustainable. Do you agree with that?
Our county workforce is the backbone of providing services.
But is it sustainable?
Oh, we have to obviously look again at what we're going to do with a shrinking,
She
a
won't
shrinking
answer.
budget. And
She
so
won't.
there's going to be, in the next round of budget negotiations, I'm sure there's going to be some serious look at some of these concessions.
All right,
She will
I'm
not,
afraid,
she will
Linda,
not commit to not raising
10
taxes
seconds.
twice.
Okay. All right, that's going to be the last word. Ladies, thank you for coming. Linda
Thank
Bell,
you.
Daniela
Thank you so
Levine
kindly.
Cava.
Thank you.
Vote Linda Bell.
This
All right.
month's elections provide plenty to talk about for our Power Roundtable
Is
today.
there ever?
And a nonprofit with a stellar history and recognized by so many and not in
boy,
financial trouble.
You know, television involves timekeeping here. A double dose of Roundtable coming up.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ring in the red.
Welcome back. The candidates for governor are turning green. A police department boss is turning red. Florida's attorney general is turning to the Supreme Court. And that all means it's time for the roundtable.
So let's get right to our guests this morning. They are familiar faces to our regular viewers. Marlon Hill, whom you see here, a Miami attorney, civic and social activist, host of his own radio show. And if you hear that lilting accent of his, you will recognize he is a native of Jamaica. David Young is a Miami attorney who specializes these days in mediation. He starred in his own syndicated TV show, Judge David Young. And we may be joined at some point by Bernadette Pardo of Radio Mambi, but maybe Bernie's been held up.
Sunday morning traffic.
Yeah.
It's bad.
Let's begin with the governor's race. David, this week, you know, the governor has been going weekly on different tours. This week it was sort of the environmental tour, Let's Keep Florida Beautiful. And he came down to Garcia's Seafood restaurant on the Miami River, and then he went down to Marathon, and he rolled out this $1 billion program over the next 10 years to protect the state's environment. Can he really brag to be an environmentalist?
It's very interesting because in the last 3 years, he's cut spending, and cut spending, Michael. And all of a sudden, he realizes he's in a tough re-election campaign, and now he's going to be the green candidate. Yeah. I think the voters will see through that. At least I hope so.
Yeah. What do you think, Marlon?
Well, you know, this race, early voting begins on Monday, 7 a.m. sharp. You know, Governor Christ has to make his way out of the primary first. But the governor had a tough race in 2010, and he went into a legislature that was not really feeling the love. But now that he's going for a second term, he has to make his way back to the middle.
And he has been moving towards the middle, I think. I thought the Herald story this morning on the front page was pretty insightful, and what it said, if you didn't read it, is that, and I'm not saying you guys didn't read it, I'm sure you did, it is that both these candidates whom we see here have been neglecting serious policy issues with ad hominem attacks on each other, and they are really nasty already, and here it is August.
Yeah, but I think that's what people like, Michael. When you look at the ratings of Fox News / entertainment, they like the divisiveness of politics. It's kind of like a 8-round fight, but people who are not really athletic. So that's the truth. So that's why you don't see many positive pieces. It's all negative. Yeah. And someday, soon, I certainly hope, the voters are going to say, we're tired of this nonsense. We want to know what you're going to do.
They say that in the polls, because as much as they may like watching a fist fight, they get to the polls and they think, who am I going to vote for? And this cycle, the independent vote being so crucial, I know people who are just kind of tuning out now. We're not even through the primaries yet.
Don't give up on them just yet. I think the independent voters are paying very close attention to this car crash that everyone is watching, and you know everyone likes to turn their heads when they're driving on the highways and
then
sneak a look.
Yeah.
That's what voters are doing right now. But unfortunately, they're going to be casualties. And we can't afford for any more casualties in the state of Florida. Voters are screaming for a vision. For the next couple months, between now and November, you're going to see voters asking for Governor Christ and Governor Scott to articulate a vision for the state of Florida.
Right, and one of the issues that they really have yet to say anything about is the expansion or possible expansion of gambling, casino gambling, the compact with the Indians. Those are really huge issues with a lot at stake.
They're huge issues, but they're not sexy issues, Michael, and that's the problem. They want to. These candidates are geared towards that 30-second soundbite. What's going to get them on the local news? And right now, casino gambling is so far down on the agenda that I don't think it's going to become an issue, although it probably should.
Yeah.
So what are the issues on the news that you would tune into?
Oh, it's crime, ethics, crime, and then more crime. I mean, look at all what leads the stories in every news broadcast. Every crime that's committed in Miami-Dade County, it's committed in Broward County, Palm Beach County, the lead stories are always either political corruption or somebody getting arrested. So that guns.
Okay, but for the gubernatorial candidates, crime is really not something that they can address other than saying
Well,
crime
in
is
fact,
down in Florida.
the governor had a tour, you know,
He had another tour.
touting-
He's like a rock star.
Yeah, well,
His
he's going to
tours.
have T-shirts for every tour. You know, the crime
I'm not
tour.
buying one, by the way.
Oh, wait, okay, I didn't think so. But he did have a tour in which he said crime is down. It's a 43-year low, proportionately in Florida. And in fact, crime is down. Of course, he's going to take credit for any time that crime is down, but that's what
Well,
politicians
you know,
do.
Governor Scott is going to take credit for anything he can take credit for over the next couple of months. That, and as an incumbent, you have that that benefit and advantage. The problem, David, that I'm going to find is that even though the voters may not buy that T-shirt, the polls say differently right now. You know, they don't want anything to do with both candidates. That's why I'm saying that after the primary, we're really going to clearly see. I want to see both of these guys next to each other, face to face with the voters of the state of Florida, and articulate a vision clearly to motivate and inspire them going to the polls. Because right now, the voters really don't want any.
But Martin, you
part.
can't discount Nan Rich. I mean, Nan Rich has assembled.
I'm glad you brought that up.
Has assembled grassroots workers from Pensacola all the way down to Key West, and you know the media did this with Eric Cantor, that he was going to win, and look, lo and behold, what happened? Eric Cantor is now a former member of the United States Congress.
Don't disagree with you at all.
Well,
I think this is something that has to happen on August 26th.
At one point, Charlie Crist was going to be the next senator from the state of Florida.
Correct.
And a fellow named Marco Rubio, who was almost non-existent in the polls, turned that around, as we well know.
And we have a history in Florida of putting the no-names into the governor's mansion. Who knew Bob Graham? I mean, it was going to be Bob Shevin was supposed to be the governor of the state of Florida. Earl
You know,
Faircloth. It goes on.
one point to respond to what you said there, Marlon. The debates are going to be, they're going to be 3 TV debates, and they will be important. At this point, however, this assumes that Nan Rich does not win. She's run a good race, but I think she's a long shot. This libertarian candidate, Adrian Wiley, got 9% in the Quinnipiac University poll. And if he gets 9 or 10%, I've got a feeling they've got to put him in the debates.
Why not? Let's create some competition. Let's create some diversity in the vision for the state of Florida. I do believe that it will add something for the voters to have a choice on the menu.
Do you know him?
I don't.
I don't think voters know him. Where is he? Why isn't he here with us? Why doesn't he make
You know what they know when they see his name? None of the above.
That's why my respect for Mr. Nader went down the tube, because of Mr. Nader, we got Mr. Bush. This guy could give the election. Mr. Wiley could give the election to Governor Scott, and that would be a shame. I think you have to look at the bigger picture.
Or vice versa, though, David.
No, I
don't think so.
No, I think he takes votes from Charlie Crist.
Absolutely, he does.
While we're talking about crime, may we sort of turn to what I call, my words, a rant this week by Miami-Dade's deputy chief. His name is Juan Perez. He was addressing a class of trainees. I was out of town, class of trainees.
Yes.
And I'd like you to, if you haven't heard, listen to a portion of what he told these trainees about what is about to happen to the police department budget in Miami-Dade.
This same tenacity is what we need out there, outside of these walls, telling the community, the commissioners, the mayor, whoever is listening, that we need them.
Juan Perez had, I don't know if you noticed, taken off his badge and said to this class, I'm not talking to you as a deputy chief right now, I'm talking to you as a citizen. You know, kind of watching that out of context, we were not there. What he said, passionate and important, the way he said it and where he said it, was that appropriate?
Oh, I think it was. I really take my hat off to him. Here's an individual who's not only a police officer, but he's a member of the community. And he was expressing his frustration for an institution, law enforcement he loves, that he's dedicated his life to, and he sees it decimated to the harm of the people of our community.
He was in the role, though, of the boss of this class. Take your badge off or not, he was
implicitly
the boss.
He's criticizing the big boss, who is the mayor, who proposed the budget that cuts these positions. So I think you could make a case that he was also insubordinate.
It also speaks to the fact that these local issues really bear a lot of emotion to folks.
Yes.
You know, you spoke
boy.
about crime earlier on, and you know these races, statewide or local, really come to home. So you know speaking to the relationship with the mayor, I think he was just speaking on raw emotion in regards to behind the scenes. We don't know the discussions that are happening internally, but it is a real issue.
Mark, let's get real. I have a friend of mine, her name is Susan. I'm not going to use her last name.
Hey, Susan.
Spoke to her on the phone today. She had an officer come to her house because there was a strange noise in her backyard at like 2 or 3 in the morning. When she met the officer said, "This may be the last time you ever see me because I'm getting laid off because of the budget cuts." That affects real people. And for county government leadership not to promote responsible budgets that's going to affect people, real people, they're not doing a service to the community, and they ought to be taken to task for that.
Yeah, well, John Rivera, the head of the Police Benevolent Association, the union in Miami-Dade, told me that with non-emergency calls, that right now the response time, forgive me, I'm not exactly sure, but it's in the vicinity of 11, 12, 13 minutes for a non-emergency call. He says that with these cuts, it's going to be more like half an hour before a police officer arrives at a home in Miami-Dade County.
Can we take a quick break? Come right back?
Absolutely.
All right, see you soon. Welcome back to the round table. With us, Marlon Hill on this side, David Young on this side, both attorneys. So let's do some law, shall we? This week, judge number 4 in Florida declared Florida's ban on gay marriage unconstitutional, a little bit different than the other 3. This was one particular case. But then Pam Bondi, the Attorney General of Florida, filed with the DCA, the 3rd District Court, let's put a hold on everything. Let's let the U.S. Supreme Court just handle everything. Is that the way it's supposed to go?
No, not at all. And she knows it's not supposed to go. There hasn't even been a case that's been taken up by the United States Supreme Court. So her filing is disingenuous because she knows that it's going to be mud on her face if she argues in front of the 3rd District or the Florida Supreme Court. But procedurally, Glenna and Michael, the 3rd District can waive, and I think they are going to waive in the 4th, they're hearing this case, so it'll go right to the Florida Supreme Court. Yeah. Let the Florida Supreme Court, it's a states' rights issue. We passed an amendment, which we should not have passed, which I think is blatantly unconstitutional. Let them declare it unconstitutional, or call it constitutional, however they're going to rule, and then you go to the United States Supreme Court. But to overstep it is just not the right thing to do. Bondi knows better.
Well, our 3rd branch of government is alive and well, and the voters are going to be starting on Monday again, early voting for judges, county court, circuit court. And as this issue, marriage equality, makes its way through our court system, the citizens need to pay very close attention as to what their rights are under the Constitution. 3rd DCA, Florida Supreme Court. If the state and Pam Bondi has an issue with the Florida Supreme Court, she can take it to the U.S. Supreme Court after that.
She hasn't even filed an appeal yet.
No, she has not. No. And David, to your point, you know, if the U.S. Supreme Court grants cert, that is, if they say, yes, we'll hear a case from
like a lawyer.
Utah. I'm sorry, I'm not. Be careful here. But there's a case from Utah, a case from Oklahoma, which have both said we're going to ask the U.S. Supreme Court. But even if they agree to hear it, it would not be until May or June of 2015.
Correct.
That there would be a decision. And in the interim, of course, Pam Bondi, who's running for re-election, doesn't get embarrassed, and in November doesn't have to answer all those nagging questions about why are you delaying the rights of the plaintiffs in these 4 cases who have won at the circuit court level.
So there we have the car wreck of the 2nd branch of government intersecting with our judicial process. And there it is.
Yeah.
And you know, it's all political. It's strictly political, and Bondi wants to appeal to her base because she wants to run for governor in the next election. That's pretty well known. And by saying, you know, who cares about individual rights? Who cares about the fact that in the United States Constitution, we treat everybody equally in the United States of America? That's why people die to come over here. Forget about them. I want my base. I want them to vote for me for governor. I think it's absolutely 100% shameful.
Marlon, let me ask you, you raised the very good issue of judicial races. August 26th, all voters are able to vote. You don't have to be Republican, Democrat. You can be, as I am, NPA, no party affiliation. But I have to tell you, I struggle when I go to the polls. I know some of these judges, and I will vote yay or nay, depending on what I know about the candidates. But, you know, the fact is, I don't think I'm qualified to say who should sit on the bench and who should not. What do you say when somebody says, how am I supposed to vote?
Unless the next time you get your speeding ticket, or the next time you're in the wrong club or the wrong place, or you're in the middle of a divorce, or that contract dispute, you don't end up in front of the court system. Most citizens do not. But however, it's very, very important that you do your homework on these candidates. What do you do?
How do you do your homework? They're not, when they campaign, a judicial candidate, when they campaign, and you can speak to this, you were one, you can't talk about where you stand. You can't talk about your platform. You just put your name out there. So how does a voter
speak to other judges,
know?
former judges. Speak
Well,
to other
here's a
attorneys.
former judge right here. And
You're on. You're on.
Well, you know, I posed a situation last time when I was not in office anymore, that I think that the voters should not be voting on circuit judges. There's no way that they know enough, that they're informed enough to know which individuals can handle the responsibility of taking the life of another human being.
And so how
what-
do they get there? A
Well-
judicial nominating committee? And how do you take the politics out of that?
Well, supposedly with the judicial nominating, Glenna, there is going to be a screening process of individuals who can ask the right questions. And I think county courts should be elected by the people, because they're people's court, anybody can get a ticket, anybody can be involved in small litigation. But circuit courts should be different. But that doesn't answer your question. The answer to your question is you have to see which organizations are supporting which candidates. And if an organization has an ideological bent and they're supporting a candidate, then you know where that candidate really and truly stands.
so if, say, the Christian Family Coalition says this is a great candidate and you don't like their politics, then you can sort of say, hey, I
You
will
take,
or I
you take
won't.
a second look. You take a second
Yeah.
look. You know, with the judges, you have to absorb all the information that's necessary. You look at what
Yeah.
the bar associations are recommending. Some of the bar associations have polls: who's qualified, who's highly qualified, who's not qualified.
All right, well,
Take a look
that's
at that.
good.
Well, question about those polls. Those are attorneys
Sure.
voting.
Because
Now,
they have
do
to
it-
interact with the judges on a daily basis.
And if a judge, in front of a judge, if an attorney continuously is losing cases, wouldn't that make that vote be this
it's
judge
only
is
one
unqualified?
factor, Glenna. Only one factor. The voters still have to do a lot of homework. Look at the editorials.
Do I sound
look at the
too
polls.
skeptical to you?
Absolutely.
Well, this is the one area where I have to say I think that the newspaper editorial pages with their recommendations in judges' races carry perhaps more weight. You know, we have 30 seconds left. Marlon, I want to ask you, very interesting development this week. Dwight Bullard, state senator from South Miami-Dade, became the chair, was elected by acclamation, the chair
Absolutely.
of the Miami-Dade Democratic Party. What's that?
First African-American chair of the Miami-Dade Democratic Party. We have over 1.3 registered voters in Miami-Dade County, mostly Democrats.
1.3 million.
1.3 million, 1.1 in Broward, and about 800,000. So South Florida itself, over 3 million registered voters, right? The African-American community is about 19% of Miami-Dade County's population. The fact that he was elected as the first African-American chair, first black chair of the Miami-Dade,
Breakthrough.
very breakthrough.
We'll
A
say
great
congrats to
thing.
him.
It's a great, Dwight's a wonderful guy.
On that note, we gotta go. Up next, we are taking our talents to South Beach. An iconic landmark is making its new and improved debut.
The South Point Pier opens this week, and we are going to take you there, or Janine Stanwood will, next.
In the neighborhood.
Once the backdrop for a bathing beauty contest in the 1920s, a historic Miami Beach pier has now been reincarnated. The renewed and improved South Point Pier is just about ready for its unveiling.
Almost 2 years since demolition and millions in the making. It's in Janine Stanwood's neighborhood, and she has a sneak peek.
At the end of South Point Park, jutting from the white sand, is South Point Pier reincarnated. 450 feet of durable South American wood, aluminum, and concrete.
Still a few days away from opening.
The city of Miami Beach wanted it open by spring, but weather delayed that.
This is a cleanup now.
It's just cleanup.
Funding for the $4.8 million project, on budget we're told, comes from bed taxes and a state grant. The first pier on Miami Beach was built in the 1920s, about 2 blocks north.
I've never seen a good shot of the interior, so we don't know for sure if there were sleeping rooms, accommodations, but there were stores, there were other restaurants.
There was also a bathing casino, but a hurricane in 1926 seriously damaged the pier. By the 1960s, the bathing houses and shops were gone, and in 1979, a new pier was built. But weather took its toll again, and it closed for safety. It wasn't until it was demolished last year and the coral underneath was relocated that this new pier, complete with fish cleaning stations, would become a reality.
Yeah, it's been a long time waiting.
And on this day, avid fishermen tell us it's been a long time coming.
It's going to help a lot, for people that really like fishing.
When it opens, what's the first thing you're going to do?
Go fishing, that's it.
In the neighborhood, I'm Janine Stanwood for This Week in South Florida.
Janine, thank you very much. The pier is scheduled to open to the public on Friday.
Probably different bathing suits out there.
I hope so.
Still to come, deja vu all over again. Another mayoral recall campaign is underway, but at what cost?
And here is a live look. There it is from our Fort Lauderdale Tower cam. Looks beautiful.
And here's meteorologist Roland Stedham with your Sunday forecast.
Hi, everybody. It looks like South Florida is going to be enjoying another mostly sunny day today. We have this weak area of low pressure that is spinning right around the southern Bahamas. That counterclockwise rotation is bringing in this dry wedge of air that's going to be affecting us. Now, even though we're going to have mostly sunny skies and hot temperatures, there's still the potential for a few isolated thunderstorms around some of the inland areas this afternoon. But if you're going to the beaches, lots of sunshine, water temperature 88 degrees, the air temperature 89 degrees with very light winds out of the southeast at about 10 miles per hour. It means the surf is going to be flat and there's no risk of any rip currents. So the forecast today and tomorrow, mostly sunny skies. Again, a slight chance of a storm in the afternoon. Then the moisture comes back a little more earnestly here on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, which means a better chance of some thunderstorms in the afternoon. Hope that you have an awesome Sunday.
Thanks, Roland. For the second time in as many administrations, a recall effort is underway to oust Miami-Dade's mayor. But what a difference 3 years makes. The then recall of then Mayor Carlos Alvarez was driven by and almost single-handedly funded by Norman Brayman, one of the county's wealthiest businessmen. And he tapped into county-wide anger over Alvarez orchestrating a tax hike during the recession. At the same time, he gave salary increases to county employees and supported the Marlins Stadium debacle. Jimenez, this time, it's a grassroots recall campaign to recall Carlos Jimenez, and it's launched by a retired county firefighter with a deeply personal stake in it, based on the mayor's refusal to raise taxes and instead defund services and salaries to cover a lean county budget. And one of the defunded services involves the county fireboats, which were dry docked the night the recall organizer's son and others died in a boat crash. Also this time, there really is no county-wide anger. In fact, there are signs generally that county residents support keeping taxes flat. And here's something else to consider. Recalls are expensive. Not only the campaign to get on the ballot, but the special election itself can cost $4 or $5 million, double that for another special election to elect another mayor. Recalls are supposed to be the move of last resort, reserved for malfeasance or mismanagement. And the way it's supposed to work is if you don't like a mayor or a commissioner's decisions or policies, you show up to County Hall, you press for change, work the system, and then vote them out in the next election. Miami-Dade's mayor is up for re-election in just 2 years. And of course, we invite you to weigh in on any topic you like. Email, Facebook, Twitter, at any of these addresses right there on your screen. We are always easy to find and ready to talk.
And we even respond when you send us emails and tweets.
Always.
And remember, stay informed and get involved.
Have a beautiful Sunday. We'll see you next week.